It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Greta Christina, who was our... Woo, that's right! Greta is... wow, Greta's amazing. Although, I suppose you already knew that. Greta, of course, is one of our movement's most prolific and popular bloggers. And if you've spent any time reading her blog at the cleverly named Greta Christina's blog, is there a .com at the end of that or something? Then you know why. Because Greta takes issues that are simultaneously a little bit hard to deal with on an intellectual level, and also kind of a little bit hard to deal with on an emotional level, issues like sex that make us a little bit squeamish, and not only, I think, lays them bare in a way that, that just cuts straight to, thank you so much for laughing at that pun, it makes the issue so clear. That, you kind of are like, oh, I've been thinking that for years about that thing, but I've never been able to articulate it in any sort of way, even approaching that. So not only is she right, but she's right in such a way that it is painfully, devastatingly obvious. And it feels so exciting to read that and to read it so frequently as well. I could yammer on and on about Greta's other amazing qualities, but I, like you, would rather just listen to her talk. So, come on up, Greta. I've inflicted this on you before. Okay. This includes your Q&A time. So.
Okay. Hi, thank you, August, so much for that lovely introduction, and thank you so much to everybody at the Secular Student Alliance for organizing this incredible conference, and also just for being such an amazing organization, and that includes all of you. I mean, essentially the people here in this room are the flesh and blood of this organization, and you're the flesh and blood of this movement in the next 10 and 20 and 50 years, and thank you for doing that. So my topic today is resistance is not futile, why arguing about religion is not a waste of time. So, is it worthwhile to argue about religion? Yes. All right, well, thank you very much. I think we have a little time for Q&A. All right. Cheap joke, cheap, obvious, stupid joke, not worthy of me. In all seriousness, I do have more to say about this. Yes, I do think arguing about religion is very much worthwhile. To some extent, whether it's worthwhile depends on context. And, of course, it's not the only form of activism that we should be engaging in. And if you personally don't want to try to argue religious believers out of their religion, I think that's valid. I certainly don't think it's morally required. But if you're somebody who currently doesn't argue with people about religion, either in public forums or private conversations, I'd like for you to at least consider stepping out of your comfort zone and trying it. I would certainly like to encourage you to question some of the assumptions that you might be making about debating about religion, and some of the assumptions you might be making about whether persuading people out of religious beliefs is productive. And I definitely would like to persuade you that arguing about religion can be a valuable thing for other people to do, even if you personally don't engage in it. And for everybody here, whether you're already on board or not, whether you already currently engage in debates with people about their religious beliefs or tend to stay away from that, I want to talk about, basically I'd like to talk about strategies for debating religion effectively. I'd like to talk about which situations it may or may not make sense to do it in. And I want to talk about which goals of the atheist movement we can hope to accomplish by trying to persuade people out of their religious beliefs. So before I start, I want to spell one thing out very, very clearly. I am not, repeat, not, big circle / not, talking about the tone wars here. I'm not talking about confrontationalism versus diplomacy. I'm not talking about whether we should or should not be dicks. That's a different conversation. That's a conversation worth having, but it is a different conversation. This is about whether trying to persuade people out of religion is worth doing regardless of whether that's being done in a confrontational or diplomatic tone. Okay, is that distinction clear with everybody? Okay, good. Okay, good. No tone wars tonight. So first of all, I want to challenge one of the assumptions that's most commonly made about trying to persuade people out of their religious beliefs, and that's the assumption that it never works. And this is an assumption that a lot of atheists make. Very often when I put up an argument on my blog against religion, here's, reason 29,642 why religion is wrong, I get comments from atheists saying, why are you bothering to do this? Why do you waste your time making arguments against religion? It never works. Religious beliefs are too irrational. They're held for emotional reasons, not rational ones, and not intellectual ones. So there's no point in making rational arguments against it. In a word, bullshit. This does work. Ask any atheist writer with even a moderately sized readership, and there's a lot of us here in the room today. Ask me, ask Jen McCrite, ask P.Z. Myers, ask any of us. We get emails all the time from people telling us, I am now an atheist, in part because of arguments you made. Your arguments against religion are a big part of why I am now an atheist. I used to believe, you made some arguments, and that made a difference, and because of you, I am now an atheist. These are not isolated incidents. We get these all the time. PZ, obviously, who's the 900-pound gorilla in the world of atheist blogging, he said at TAM a couple weeks ago that he gets hundreds of emails every month from people saying that he changed their minds. These are not isolated incidents. They're very common. In fact, I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb here. I want to see a quick show of hands. First of all, how many people here in the room are atheists or some other form of non-believer? Okay, gee, what a surprise. Okay, now if your hand was up, keep it up. Now, how many of you with your hands up used to at one time have some sort of religious or spiritual belief? Okay. Now, again, if your hand was up, keep it up. And now, one more time, for those of you who still have your hands up, how many of you became non-believers, at least in part, not necessarily entirely, but in part, because of arguments that you heard against religion? How many of you became non-believers, had the process started towards becoming an atheist, or had the process moved forward, or had the final nail in the coffin put in because of arguments you read? Keep your hands up. Everybody look around. This is not a trivial number. This is not an insignificant number. This does work. This does work. So why do so many people assume that it doesn't? I think there's a couple of reasons for this pessimism. The first is overly ambitious expectations. Yes, arguments against religion can and do persuade people out of their beliefs, but it rarely does so right away. I have apparently persuaded a lot of people into atheism. I have never once done it in the course of a single conversation. Not once, and I don't know any atheist who's persuaded somebody out of their beliefs in the course of one conversation. A single conversation, a single argument is probably not by itself going to convince somebody that their beliefs are mistaken. I mean, religious beliefs are usually very deeply held. People who make that, they're right about that. People usually do have religious beliefs for very emotional reasons, not necessarily for rational reasons, and letting go of religious beliefs can be very scary. For most people, letting go of religion is a process. And while other people can help along with that process, it is something ultimately that people need to do on their own. So if you're expecting to persuade somebody out of their religious beliefs in a single conversation, you're going to get very frustrated and very disappointed. I certainly was when I first started, in my early days as an atheist blogger, and I'd get into these debates and I'd be, but my arguments are so good. Why won't you change your mind? Just change your mind, Reverend. Really, don't let that discourage you. Don't think of it as winning or losing an argument. Don't think that because they didn't change their mind, you lost the argument. Think of it as helping to move somebody a little further along the path. Think of it as planting the seeds of doubt, or as nurturing and watering seeds of doubt that may already be there. And if somebody is engaging with atheists, if somebody's visiting your atheist blog or visiting your atheist group, chances are they're already having questions. And you can just add a little bit of fertilizer to that little seedling of doubt. Okay, so I think that that's one reason why many atheists are pessimistic about arguing against religion. It's overly ambitious expectations about what one argument can accomplish. But I think there's another important reason, and this isn't a very nice conclusion, but I think it's true, and I sort of have made a habit of saying things that I think are true, even though they're not very nice. That's kind of what my blog is kind of famous for. And so I think I'm going to say it anyway. I think that many atheists convince themselves that arguing against religion is worthless because they personally don't want to do it. They don't like confrontation. They're afraid of alienating people, etc. They want a reason not to do it, and so they persuade themselves that it's ineffective and that it's worthless. But you know what? You don't need a reason not to do this. If you personally don't want to try to argue people out of their religious faith, that is fine. Don't do it. Really, I am entirely sincere about this. There are lots of ways to be an atheist activist, and we all have to go about it in our own way. If you choose to focus your arguments on things like anti-atheist bigotry or separation of church and state, or if you choose not to argue at all, and if your form of atheist activism is just to be a model of positive, happy, ethical atheism, and to do, to provide support and to do service projects and so on, really, that is awesome. I am entirely 100% sincere about that. That is all worth doing. We need people to do all of that. There are plenty of jobs to go around in atheism. And really, if those of us who are trying to pry people out of religion are going to do it, we need people to provide them a safe place to land when they come out. And, I absolutely... And in fact, I think a lot of us could be doing both of those jobs. I think we can do the prying and also provide the pillows. That is hugely important. We need people to do that. And I applaud you if you're focusing your energies on that. But I want to ask you to take responsibility for that choice. Don't say, I don't argue about religion because it's a waste of time. Honestly, it's not true, and it's kind of a cop-out. Say, I don't argue against religion because I don't want to argue against religion. And as you take responsibility for that choice, you might find that you change your mind about that choice, at least sometimes. Or you might not. You might just decide that you're comfortable with that choice. But take responsibility for that choice. And don't get in the way of other people who are making the opposite choice, because we are having an effect and what we're doing is working. All right, well, okay, so that little mini harangue is over. I've hopefully convinced you, those of you who weren't already convinced, that persuading people out of religion can be worth it. And I want to talk now about some specific strategies of how to go about doing it. And I want to talk about what we can hope to accomplish by doing it. Okay, for starters, remember all those emails I talked about from people saying your arguments help persuade me out of my religious beliefs? There's a very important point I want to make about those emails that don't come from the people that I had been debating. They came from people who had been lurking. They came from people who had been watching and listening to the arguments. It is certainly possible that one of the people that I tangled with directly one-on-one on my blog about religion is now a full-fledged atheist because of those arguments. But if they are, I haven't heard about it. None of them has written to me to say, hey, you're right. The Reverend Colley has not yet written to me, to say, you're right and I'm now quit my job. The people who have been persuaded have not been the people that I've been debating with. It's been the onlookers. And that is a very important point to keep in mind about arguing over religion. The people you're trying to convince aren't necessarily the people that you're arguing with. It's the people who are looking on, and that's true for big public debates. Chances are if you're debating William Lane Craig, he's not going to change his mind. You're not talking to him. You're talking to the people in the audience. And it's also true for debates in online forums and blogs and so on. Which brings me to a very important point about strategy. It is generally a waste of time to have these debates privately, one-on-one. This is a point that JT made when he spoke at the American Atheist Conference in Des Moines, and it really stuck with me. I think it's really important. If somebody comes to you and says, I'm concerned about your immortal soul, and I would really like to sit down with you over coffee and talk about why you're an atheist, don't just say, sure, why not? Say, sure, why not? Can I video the conversation and put it on YouTube? If somebody emails you and says, I saw something you wrote about atheism and I really don't agree with you and I'd like to tell you the 10 reasons why everything you say is wrong, don't just email them back and say, fine, here's in my private email, here's the 10 reasons why your 10 reasons are wrong. What you say instead is, sure, can I post your letter on my blog or on my Facebook page and respond to it there? So this accomplishes two things. First of all, it screens out people who aren't serious. As JT said when he gave this talk at American Atheist, it is really amazing how quickly people's concern for your immortal soul vanishes when they're faced with the prospect of making a fool of themselves in public. And second, and more to the point, if they say yes, they've given you a public forum for making your case. And our case is better than theirs. Okay, now, there's a really important caveat that I want to say about that, which is if we're talking about somebody that you're really close to, like your parents, your siblings, your closest friends, you might want to suspend this rule, that whole, subjecting them to public humiliation thing that you might be willing to inflict on casual acquaintances. You might not want to go there with people that you're really close to. And in fact, I would actually counsel you to think very, very carefully about getting into arguments about religion with people that you're really close to, and I mean at all. And I'm not saying don't do it, I'm saying think about it really hard. I have lost friends over arguments that we had over religion, and that I thought was we're just debating this, we're having a lively debate, and now they won't speak to me. These arguments really, they can be very divisive. And if you have religious people in your life who you're not willing to alienate, who you're not willing to lose, you might decide to stay off the topic of religion, or at least you might want to keep your conversations focused on explaining your atheism and, exploding the myths about atheism and so on, rather than trying to pry them out of their beliefs. That's kind of a different topic, though, and while it is actually really important and it's really relevant to this, I don't have time to get into it fully tonight. This is the short, compact version of this talk, and I want to get into a few more strategy points before I finish here. Okay, so there's another really important strategy point that I want to make about debating religion, and it's one that it took me a really embarrassingly long time to learn. You are not going to find a magic bullet. You are not going to find the one perfect argument that persuades every religious believer out of their religion. Believe me, if we'd found that argument, we would be making it all the time. I would only ever be blogging that one argument every single day. We would be using that. It doesn't exist. There is no magic bullet. And that's not just because religion is held for emotional reasons and so on, although that's part of it. It's also because different arguments work with different people. What do you know? We all have different brains, and different arguments work differently on us. I once did a poll on my blog, admittedly a very informal, very unscientific poll on my blog. I was asking atheists who had once been believers what had persuaded them to change their minds. And I found two things with the responses. First of all, the responses were tremendously varied, and they were all over the map. There were a few common themes that cropped up sort of a little bit more often than others, but really nothing stood out as the one argument that persuaded most atheists to become atheists. There is no one argument that did that. And second, and this is really important, when I asked people, what made you become an atheist? A lot of people gave more than one answer. It's not like, oh yes, I realized that, the Bible was full of fallacies and then poof, I became an atheist. They gave multiple answers. For a lot of people, probably for most people, becoming an atheist is a process. And it often takes a lot of different ideas falling into place for it to happen. So remember that you're not going to find a single magic bullet. If you look for a single magic bullet, you're going to get frustrated and you're going to get disappointed. Different arguments work on different people, and some people need to hear more than one argument. Which brings me to another very important principle of debating religion, and this is another one that I have a very hard time with, and that is patience. Yeah, I have a hard time with that one. This can be a very challenging principle to remember. I mean, each one of us has personally heard the bad arguments for religion like 800,000 times. And when we hear somebody make one of these bad arguments for religion the 800,001st time, it's like it makes us want to roll up a newspaper and smack people across the head with it. But it's really important to remember this. I mean, yes, these arguments are very old to most of us. Pascal's wager, shoot me now, you know. I can refute Pascal's wager in my sleep while drunk. But these arguments aren't old to the people that we're arguing with. Many believers have really never seriously considered the foundations for their beliefs or the lack thereof. And many believers have never really encountered serious resistance. You know, they're like, Pascal's wager, this is a brilliant idea. They think they came up with it themselves. And so we need to be willing to make our case again and again and again with each new person who we're arguing with, and we need to remember to have as much patience with the 800,001st person that we're debating with as we do with the first one. A good analogy is, think about being a school teacher, and if you're a 5th grade teacher teaching algebra, you understand algebra, you've explained algebra, 20 times, or more in your 20 years of teaching, but the students in your algebra class, they've never heard it before. And it doesn't make any sense to get irritated with them because they don't know algebra. So the same thing applies to us. It doesn't make sense to get irritated with people, even though I sometimes do, because they haven't heard these arguments before. We are new to getting our arguments out in the world. I have a whole lot more to say about all of this, but again, this is the short, compressed version of this talk, and I think I'm running low on time here. And I want to move on from these tactical issues. And I want to get back to the really big, exciting strategy questions. I started out this talk by asking a very big question indeed. Which goals of the atheist movement will be helped by trying to persuade people out of their religion? And honestly, I think the answer is all of them. I am entirely serious about this. Okay, now I do think if you're doing alliance work with religious believers, on issues you have in common, you probably do want to agree temporarily to set these debates aside. That's kind of the nature of alliance work. You set aside the things you disagree about and work on the things you have in common. That's sort of by definition what it means. So yeah, if you're doing service projects with a religious group, or you're working on separation of church and state with a progressive religious organization, yeah, sure, temporarily, for the purposes of that project, you can put this stuff on hold. But we shouldn't have to set it aside permanently. Interfaith or other coalition work should never come at the cost of atheists having to shut up permanently about our objections to religion. That cost is way too high. And more than that, I would argue this. The attempt to persuade people out of religion, it doesn't just help the goal of creating a world with less religion. It helps our other goals as well. It helps our goal of reducing anti-atheist bigotry. It helps our goal of improving separation of church and state. It will help us create a world where atheism is more accepted and where religion's special privilege status is diminished or possibly even eliminated. I realize that that's kind of an extreme statement, and so I want to explain why I think that. Okay, so here's the thing. Arguing about religion, it doesn't just have the effect of persuading people out of their religious beliefs. It also repositions religion as just another idea about the world. It repositions religion as just one more idea that can be questioned and criticized just like any other. It strips religion of its special privileged status. And we are all familiar with how religion gets treated as a special case. Any critique of religion gets treated as disrespectful. People treat religion with kid gloves, even in arenas that usually accept very vigorous debate. In the marketplace of religion, in the marketplace of ideas, we are all familiar with how religion gets a free ride. When we argue against religion, we are putting an end to that free ride. And that helps us with all of the fights that we're fighting. For instance, it makes a fight for separation of church and state easier. When people see religion as just one more idea about the world, they're less likely to demand that their particular idea be taught in the public schools, or be posted in public buildings, or otherwise theocratically crammed down our throats. When people see religion as just one more idea about the world, they're less likely to give special exemptions to people who hold a particular version of that idea. You know, exemptions like letting religious believers deny medical care to their children, or giving religious organizations a pass on health and safety standards for their daycare centers. And this reframing of religion also makes the fight against anti-atheist bigotry easier. When people see religion as just one more idea about the world, they're more likely to see atheism as just one more idea about the world. An idea whose adherents are just as likely to be, good and happy and honest and ethical people as anybody else. Even if they disagree with the idea of atheism, they're less likely to see atheists as wicked and scary on the face of it. And what's more, and I think this is kind of at the core of a lot of what I'm talking about here, if we can successfully reframe religion as an idea that can be legitimately debated, that helps move it away from being an identity that people see as a core part of their being. And if you know anything about cognitive dissonance and rationalization, you know that people are better able to hear disagreement when they don't feel like their core identity is being attacked. And I think this is sort of one of the main reasons why disputes and disagreements between atheists and believers can be so fraught, is we see religion as an idea. We see it as a hypothesis. It's a really lousy hypothesis, but we see it as a hypothesis. They see it as an identity. They see it as like being gay or something like that. And so when you say, I think Catholicism is, completely unfounded, they don't hear, oh, gee, I have this idea that you think might be mistaken. They hear you are stupid and bad at your core. And so I think that when we shift, the more we can do to shift religion from being an identity to being an idea, the easier these conversations become. And that's true whether we're battling really specific, harmful manifestations of religion, like, faith healing or something like that, or whether we're battling the whole idea of religious faith. People are going to be more receptive to these ideas, to these criticisms, if we can help them see religion as an idea that they might be mistaken about, rather than a core part of their inherent self that we are calling stupid and bad. So again, arguing against religion doesn't just persuade people out of religion. It repositions religion as just another idea about the world. It strips religion of its free ride. And that helps all of the fights that we're fighting. So please consider engaging in it. And if you don't, please support those of us who do. Thank you.